Latin nouns are divided into 5 distinct groups called declensions based on how these nouns end and how these nouns change based on their grammar. We group nouns into these declensions based on the ending of the genitive case. This video covers nouns of the second declension, the O declension, so termed because this vowel is thematic. It's found in many of the endings. We will discuss only masculine nouns here. Since we use the genitive case to determine to which declension a noun belongs, you will always see a noun listed with its nominative subject form, and this will be followed by its genitive form, the of form of the noun. Second declension nouns always end in an I in their genitive singular, and this I will tell you that a noun is in the second declension. The endings for the second declension are us, I, o, o, and in the plural, I, orum, is, os, is. From these endings, you can really see that this is the O declension. The stem for second declension nouns actually ends in an O, so the stem for the noun servos is actually servo. When the O is short, it weakens and changes to a short U, so that's why the nominative and accusative singular have a U when most everything else has an O. So let's decline. We'll take our noun servus, servi, and use the fact that the first form servus is the nominative singular, and the second form servi is the genitive singular. Then we look at servi and remove the ending I. S-E-R-V is the stem, and we add our endings to this. O, I, orum, is, os, is. Now that we have the full declension, it helps to add translations. The slave, or a slave, since Latin doesn't differentiate between the slave, a slave, or even just slave. Of the slave, to for the slave as the object of a verb, and the ablative by, with, from, in, on the slave. The plurals go likewise. Beware of identical forms, though. The genitive singular and nominative plural have the same long I ending, and the dative and ablative are also identical in both the singular and the plural. Remember, context is the important tool to use when differentiating between each of these. Always treat your Latin sentence as a whole and allow it to tell you what case each noun is in. There's another class of second declension masculine nouns. That's the group that, instead of ending in a us in the nominative singular like servus, ends in an er, like ager, agri, or puer, pueri. The genitive singular still ends in a long I, which means these words must be second declension, but the nominatives look just a little bit different. So what do? Let's follow our rules and do the same thing. So the first thing we're going to do is write down the nominative and genitive forms. Then we remove the long I from the genitive and use this form as our stem. And to this, we add the endings. So, ager, agri, agro, agrum, agro, and the plural agri, agrorum, agris, agros, agris. And puer, pueri, puero, puerum, puero, and the plural pueri, puerorum, pueris, pueros, pueris. Some second declension nouns that end in er keep the er in all of its endings, like puer, but others, like ager, lose the e before the r. The key is to check the genitive case forms. This will always tell you if the e is lost, like in ager, agri, or not, like in puer, pueri. The word deus, dei, God, has slightly different forms in the plural, so let's decline it to show this. We'll take our nominative and genitive forms, and the stem is a de. Okay, so we can form the singular and plural by just placing our regular second declension endings on the end. But in the plural, there are alternative forms. So sometimes you'll find dei for the nominative plural, other times the e will go away and you'll get just di. The same thing happens for the dative and ablative plurals, dis instead of deis. And the genitive plural is sometimes deum instead of deorum. This um ending, by the way, is really similar to the third declension genitive plural, which might be the reason for the other form. If you compare the first declension with the second declension, you'll notice quite a bit of similarities, especially with the dative and ablative plurals. The genitive plural for both declensions end similarly, but with a different vowel. The same vowel difference is for the accusative plurals and the ablative singulars. And the accusative singulars both end in an M. This similarity is not a coincidence. Most first declension nouns are feminine, while most second declension nouns that end in a us or er are masculine. The only exception in the second declension are names of countries and towns like Aegyptus, and plants, trees, and gems like Laurus, which are feminine. There are also second declension nouns that are neuter, but we will not go into those endings in this video. You must know your declensions in Latin in order to read some of the greatest works of literature ever created. There's no getting around that, and the more time you spend with these endings, the better you'll be. So devote your time, memorize these endings, and you'll be halfway there.